What do you know? Welcome to the History of LA Ska one-on-one sessions. I'm Junor Francis alongside our producer and my good friend Eric Kohler. Now, this series celebrates and aims to preserve and promote the ska, rocksteady, and vintage reggae scene in Southern California and beyond through insightful conversations with legends and modern-day talents, including those behind the scene. So when you listen to this podcast series or watch us on YouTube, we want to say many, many thanks for your support. And of course, responsibility to tell all your friends to follow us. And we really appreciate the effort. Now, in this episode, we welcome two members of the San Diego, California-based ska punk group, Boko 9. Vocalist, musician, frontman, Jon Pebsworth. Did I say your name correctly, Jon?
Yeah, you did.
And Jonas Kleiner.
Yes, welcome, gentlemen.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks you guys.
We're coming from the greater Los Angeles area. You guys in San Diego. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but over the past, I think, going on 3 decades now, San Diego, per capita, San Diego has more reggae bands than any other place. And
yep.
No way. Sure. I didn't know that, but I believe it.
Largely has to do with Big Mountain. They went like this, and everybody in San Diego started playing reggae. So some credit to Big Mountain.
Absolutely, we call them the never give ups.
They're on a rebound now. As a matter of fact, they're playing in Los Angeles this week.
I saw. Yeah, that's great.
Yes. But you guys didn't follow. You guys played more, for lack of a better definition, punk ska as opposed to reggae, right? Which was the trend at the time, or trending at the time.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think when we started doing it, it wasn't really that much of a trend yet. It became that. You know, I think that most of the bands in San Diego that were doing anything in this world were more traditional bands, or they were reggae bands. And I think we may have been, I'm not saying we're the first, but you know, I think we were probably one of the earlier bands to kind of incorporate like the punk rock sound along with, you know, ska, but we're also huge reggae fans, you know, so a reggae influence was there. You may not hear it in the music so much, but it's a big part of what we, you know, like we all collectively would listen to together, you know, because our horn players come from reggae, you know, Jonas and I kind of maybe come from a little bit more punk rock backgrounds, and, you know, so that mix of like the diverse mix of our members at the time, and which happened to be proudly the same members 30 years later today,
which is pretty incredible. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Absolutely, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. We want to hear a lot about the San Diego scene and obviously the formation of your band and a lot of what you're working on now, because I understand you might be working on something new. But before we do that, Jon, we need to first also say how thankful we are, right? You had a really bad health scare.
I did.
December 21, correct?
Yes, right at the New Year's Eve mark. I had a basically a massive heart attack, and managed to survive that.
Wow.
And I spent some time in the hospital, and you know, all the things that you could probably imagine that would go along with that. But you know, here I am, and I'm so thankful to be alive. And when I say that, like, it's not like some, you know, fun little slogan that I like to say on stage, but it's like for real, you know. I'm just so happy to be alive, and it's changed my life in a lot of ways.
So
John Bell also, another member of the band, also I think he's your bassist, right?
John Bell, yeah, well, he's not our bassist anymore, but he was in the band. Yeah, and he had a pretty bad health scare as well. We were on tour, he had an intestinal like bleed. It was like a breakage.
Wow.
And yeah, so we had to like rush him to the hospital. We were in Pittsburgh, I think, right, Jonas?
Yeah, it was Pittsburgh. And yeah, it's called Meckel's diverticulum. It's
Oh,
like
wow.
this rare thing that happens sometimes to I don't know, I think people in their like the young part of their life. So we were just freaking out about that. Was just a crazy thing. I mean,
Yeah.
Right, because
he
you were
was-
out on tour, so that was
yeah.
just wild and crazy.
So that's
Luckily, we were in Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh has the best hospitals in the country, as far as I understand. And
but you guys didn't go to, you were performing in Pittsburgh, so you just went to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
exactly. Well, we called an ambulance. It was gnarly. It was
Yeah, we were actually like literally doing sound check, and it was probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were doing sound check, and he hadn't been feeling good for a few days, but we didn't, when you're on tour, you don't know, like if you don't feel good, it's probably just, you're on tour and you're eating some bad food.
You ate, not enough sleep, right?
Yeah, all those things, But no, he just literally collapsed right on stage during sound check, like just turned white and just fell down. And yeah, so it was like
So what has become of him
911.
now?
Huh?
What has become of him now? Where is he now? You said he's no longer with the band?
He's
yeah,
no
he
longer with
lived-
the band. Go ahead, Jonas.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I hear from him time to time, and he's doing good. I mean, he lives
He's
in
been in the music
Temecula.
business?
He's a some type of engineer, like electrical engineer, or he went into engineering, went to UCSD, and
Okay. Yeah.
so, but he's, yeah, man, John Bell. He's the original bass player for Unwritten Law. That
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
how a punk rock band we used to play tons of shows with.
Yeah.
And we were just lucky. We at the time, he filled a slot for a little bit, and he's just a hell of a player. So yeah, thankfully, two important people in the world of Bucko 9
Yes.
are alive after these health scares. I mean, when that shit happened to Pebs,
Yeah.
I was
talk about
crying. I mean, I was just like, what the fuck?
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that must have scared you and the rest of the guys so much. And John, but talk about your road to recovery.
Well, so I spent the first 7 days after the heart attack in the ICU.
Right.
And so, there's no visitors, there's nothing, you just have a nurse literally sitting, 5 feet away from you, just watching your, your stats and all that stuff. And, and it was a mind bender, dude, through that period. And then I finally was able to stabilize. And then they got me into my own room in the hospital, and I stayed there for, I can't remember if it was a week, maybe. It's just like by myself, because they also said that I had COVID.
Oh no.
And so, nobody could come visit me, and I was in a room by myself. So it's just me and the TV, and I watched this. I would just binge watch this show called Alaska: The Last Frontier.
Okay.
And and I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show, but it's pretty freaking amazing. It's about a family that lives in Alaska, and they just basically live off the land and they do everything themselves, and it's like super punk rock in my opinion. And
Right.
I just fell in love with them, and they kind of guided me through it and helped, kind of like help me stay positive. And and then I had my phone, so people could call me and text me and stuff like that. And I would there was a window in my hospital room that I could walk up to. I was on the second floor, and my wife would come and stand outside and look up, and we could kind of communicate. you know, with hand gestures and stuff like that.
Wow.
I think I pressed my butt up against the a couple times, you know, because you're in your gown. So, but yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I got through it because I had my support group, you know, and
there was a
it
lot
was,
of outpouring of support and love on social media, and
yeah, that, oh man, that was just
definitely right.
incredible,
Yeah.
you know. So, yeah, and you know, and just like always, you know, I can always count on the music, the music that was there to help me through it, you know, listening to music and thinking about music. And we had already started writing this album that we're in the process of finishing up now.
Nice.
So there was a motivation inside me that was like, I can't die until we finish this album, you know, like I gotta make it through this to finish the album. So that helped a lot, you know, and knowing that those guys were there and, you know, ready and willing to, you know, finish doing this record together when I was ready, helped me a lot.
Wonderful.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So, baptism, you know, Ethiopian said, I know want no baptism, but sometimes baptism is good. So I want to ask about your baptism individually, your baptism to early Jamaican music, for lack of a better definition. Let's call it ska, your baptism into ska.
Sure.
How did that come about?
For me personally, it was the two-tone era. And the two-tone stuff was, I think, my very first album that I ever got. I was in 6th grade, 1970. I don't know. I want to say like 79, 80, somewhere in there. I'm 52. So my first proper ska record was Madness, absolutely. And that's where it started for me. I thought that was the greatest thing. The reason why I bought it though, because I hadn't heard it, of course, because you can't, you know, sample it on, there's no internet back then.
Right.
So my reason for, you know, asking my mom to take me to the record store to buy this very particular record that I wanted was because there was a mod kid. He was an older guy in my neighborhood that would drive around on a Vespa and had a trench coat, and he had all these patches and stuff. And on the back, his back patch was the Madness, the M with the shoe.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just thought that, and he was like the cool, you know, the coolest guy that we thought, you know, us younger kids were like riding our skateboards around, and we'd see Jeff and we'd think, man, it's almost like Beavis and Butthead have Todd, you know? They're like, hey, look, it's Todd. And we would be like, dude, there's Jeff. And he was on his Vespa and just was like so cool. Yeah. Never once talked to us, never acknowledged us. We'd try to like wave to him like, hey, Jeff. And, nah, he didn't care, you know. But that's what started it. And I figured that guy is so cool. He's on to something. So those back patches, those patches on his trench coat, they mean something.
Yes.
And I want to find out what that is. And you know, luckily for me, I managed to figure it out, and I you know, understood it pretty quickly. And then that led to like the English Beat, the Specials, the Selector, you know, Bad Manners, of course. Then those bands for me led me backwards in time. That's where, you know, then you find Toots, then you find, you know, all the greats, you know, and then you realize a lot of those two-tone songs are covers of those earlier bands.
Yes.
And then you realize, then you hear the original versions that in a lot of cases are better, and you're like, then you just fall in love with the whole thing over again, you know. So
interestingly enough.
Yeah.
But you know, it's always the gateway. Two-tone is almost always, especially in the West Coast.
Yes.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I certainly, you know, would have never known, you know, about these guys. I mean, obviously, you know, Desmond Decker, you know, had a huge song on the radio, you know,
a few years earlier, 68, right?
When we weren't even born yet, you know, so my parents even know the Israelites, you know. So and when I remember telling a story to I think it was Carson Daly when he was on doing K-Rock.
Sure.
And we were being interviewed on K-Rock, and he asked me some kind of a question about ska music, and I said, well, actually, he had said something like, oh, isn't it neat that No Doubt was the first ska band to ever have a hit single on the radio? And I said, actually, dude, that is cool, but there's no, you realize that's not the very first
My Boy
ska.
Lollipop, Millie Small.
Yeah.
My Girl Lollipop.
Mhm.
And but I used the reference of The Israelites by
Sure.
Desmond Decker in the 60s. And I said, that's the first ska song that from what I can tell was a hit song, and it was on commercial radio
From coast to
and
coast.
across the whole country. So, and he was like, he couldn't even believe it. You know what I mean?
Was
He
this
was really cool.
on camera?
Huh?
Was this on camera where you were talking about this?
No, it wasn't on
No,
camera.
okay.
This was in the 90s. It was on the radio, though. I'm sure we could probably pull up somewhere on
No
the
wonder
internet.
no wonder they kicked us out of the studio. It
And,
was
Yeah.
like,
and they took you out of rotation.
Carson
Yeah.
Daly's a fraud. He doesn't know.
Yeah.
Do not contradict the host.
Yeah.
But
No,
Rod,
but like
Rod-
I said it in a respectful way, and he was very receptive. I remember him being super cool about it, and he actually continued to ask questions about it, and I thought that was
Mhm.
that was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. So Jonas, what about your ska baptism?
Oh, it's kind of a similar story to Pebs, even though I didn't know him back then. But high school, 14, 15 skateboarding, and my best friend, partners in crime, we all listened to all kinds of early punk rock, and also we had like Madness cassettes, like John just mentioned. That was probably the first two-tone ska band I heard. But we also had the Untouchables.
Oh, yeah.
That was, and so for they were one of the first, even though they're like a more of a mod kind of ska band, but they were like one of the first that I listened to. Obviously Fishbone was huge for me. And in fact, I kind of unconsciously and consciously have their guitarist on their first records, I believe his name's Kendall, right? He man, huge influence and incredible players. So that turned me on to the idea of playing ska guitar. And I had friends, that were kind of into it. And but I picked it up really quick. And then as far as reggae goes, I mean, I think the first reggae record I heard was the soundtrack of The Harder They Come.
Nice.
Because back in those days, that was, some of the songs were like Jimmy Cliff. I mean, didn't he have a huge hit? Speaking of reggae, but whatever it was, I remember hearing Jimmy Cliff when I was a kid, and then Steel Pulse.
Come across.
Yeah, Steel Pulse when I was more like 13 or 14.
Right.
True Democracy was just
Yes.
blew my mind, and that's another thing that the guitarist of the original guitarist Basil of Steel Pulse, huge influence of mine.
Nice.
And I mean, to this day, I just love those first records. Tribute to the Martyrs is just fucking incredible.
Yeah,
And
Crisis, those early ones, yeah.
So Jonas, where you grew up? What city?
So I grew up in a couple different cities in Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia. Actually, I didn't know him, but Dave Grohl lived within I don't know, a 10-minute drive from my house.
That's close.
But so I grew up there, and then we moved to I guess I'll give you the whole thing. We moved to Australia for a bit, so I lived there for a couple years as a kid, and oh my God, that it's just as a kid living there was just because I lived in the bush, so the Aboriginals, it was the first time I'd ever it blew my mind. And to this day, my family, we have all these collectibles from the Northern Territory, Central Australia. I went to public school there for a little bit, and Bloody Angus.
Sorry, real quick.
What?
Did you move around because of one of your parents' jobs, or?
Yeah, my dad worked for I guess you could just say the government. But so and then after that, we moved back to the Virginia area for a bit, and then moved to Phoenix. So when I was hearing music, like I remember, oh my God, even like back in the days of DC, like hearing reggae music. I mean, there was like, you know, a lot of people that lived in the neighborhood, and a lot of different influences. Like my next door neighbor was like a soccer guy, but he had like all these friends that would have these parties. Keep in mind, I'm like 10, but he'd have keg parties. His name was Uva, and they'd be playing all kinds of stuff, including reggae. You know, that the tide is high, and
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like that was the first time I ever heard that song, and I'm like, whoa, what's all that? But yeah, I think it was just, you know, by the time I was 15, like Pebs was just saying, a lot very similar in that I was into the, you know, Madness, the Untouchables, Fishbone.
Yep.
Just like I was aware of all kinds of ska, but I didn't quite know the history of it. I just knew that there was this rhythm thing happening. And man, it's, you know, it permeated my life. I mean, to this day, I think every year when I get the Spotify playlist, it's like your number one genre, reggae.
Right.
It's just like
When
number
did
two,
you-
ska.
Yeah.
When did you move to San Diego?
I moved here 30 years ago. I was in 1992, and yeah, I've, you know, within, I want to say 4 or 5 months after I moved here is when I met Pebs and the Bucko Nine guys, and they were already rehearsing in the garage of the bass player at the time, Scott Kennerly. His dad had this electrician's shop in Claremont, which is kind of a central part of San Diego. And so, yeah, I looked forward to it like so much. Rehearsals like twice a week, and then started playing shows. And we played up in LA, you know, which is, oh my God, so many memories of like the most random, just insane shows. I mean,
Yeah.
Pebs will be able to fill you in on a lot of those details.
Yeah.
I don't want to hog the mic.
So before we talk about some of those shows, so Jon, you were born. We were talking off the air, but were you born in Los Angeles?
Well, I was born up north. Actually, my family is originally from Fresno.
Okay.
And when I was born in San Pablo, which is kind of a coastal town closer to San Francisco area, closer to the Bay.
Yep.
I was actually an adopted kid, and my parents, you know, were in the Bay Area for the first like 5 or 6 years of my life, and then we came to LA, and I started first grade in LA.
Okay.
So yeah, you know, we're pretty, you know, I pretty much consider myself a native, you know, LA kid.
Yeah.
I grew up in Glendale, so
Yeah.
which is just north of downtown, you know, downtown. And yeah, so I went all the way through high school in Glendale, and then I moved to San Diego the morning after I graduated from high school. And my intention was to go down or come down here and start a new band, you know, because I'd been in bands in high school up there, mostly hardcore bands.
Okay.
That's where I kind of started, like, you know, mostly like kind of thrash, hardcore, you know, hardcore punk, that kind of stuff. Never dawned on me to ever be in a ska band, even though I had already been in love with ska for many, many years. But it seemed to me as more of a genre of music that took a lot more talent and, you know, soul than I was able to conjure at the time with my musical thing. I was more doing kind of, it was thrash, you know, and like, and I loved it. I mean, I love, and I love fucking punk rock, man, so much. It's insane. I love ska and punk equally as much, you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, once I got down here, I think this is part of the question. I don't know. I tend to ramble, so just
We'll lead into the formation of Bucko Nine, if you would.
But before we
Okay.
jump, I wanted to ask Jonas about living in Australia, because this is just sheer speculation on my part, since Australia used to be a colony of England. I'm just
Right.
assuming that you would hear a sprinkle of Jamaican music of some sort in Australia?
I mean, the thing is I'm sure I did, but I didn't identify it as Jamaican. But the one thing about where I lived was it's called Alice Springs, which is in the middle of the Northern Territory. And if you look at it on a map or Google Maps or whatever, you'll see it's very isolated, and it was heavily that influence. The Aboriginals have such a unique history that they play music which is similar to a lot of there's a lot of I don't want to say African and Jamaican rhythms, but there's a very rhythmic element of what they do. And they play on very primitive instruments. Where I lived, there was only one radio station and there was 3 TV channels. So like my recollection of music back then was like neighborhood parties, and someone would play records, and yeah, we would hear all of that. Like the neighbors were just into all kinds. Like my next door neighbor's father was from England, so he had all that stuff, and we used to go camping and listen to all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, but yeah, I don't know, when I first heard Jamaican music, I think it was in Virginia, just because I think the more of the melting pot there, as opposed to Alice Springs, which was like, man, I saw some crazy stuff. But I just want to say, like, I'm so happy that, well, I mean, the Aboriginal people, they need to have their time. They need to be respected. And I saw a lot of really horrible things. And I just want to say it broke my heart, and it still does to this day.
And it's still happening, right? Still happening?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't aware of these things because as a child, you see things that look odd to you. Like, for example, when we first moved there, you know, and I had friends, like Black friends in Virginia. And so we got, you know, to our place, we got to our house and stuff. And the Todd River, which is never flowing, it's this empty riverbed, was flowing, like massive flowing. They had massive rains. This was in March during the rainy season, I guess. And there's a lot of Aboriginal kids and their families like at the Todd River in the middle of town swimming. And I was like, Dad, let's go swimming. They're all swimming, come on. And he's like, no, we can't. And it wasn't that my dad was like, he was just trying to protect me because I think he knew the locals. Like, put it this way, I remember going to the equivalent of like a 7-Eleven style store. I don't remember what they were called, and it was probably not a chain, but there was a window in the fucking back of the store where the Aboriginals had to do their transactions. They weren't even allowed in the building.
That kind of experience. And this
yes. So when I see that as a child, it affected me in such a weird way. Like it brought up emotions that I couldn't really deal with until just a couple years ago when, you know, all the fucking, well, to this day, all the murders that you see on TV. And so, yeah, it was just like being locked down in COVID and seeing all the Black Lives Matters marches. I mean, it teared me up and it freaked me out. And I finally figured out why. It's because I saw racism firsthand. And I hope to God that, I just want to say I love Australia. I love the country unconditionally. My sister was born there, so I have blood from there. But I just hope to God, like the Aboriginals, like they just get left to be their own community and no one fucks with them. I don't know what's going on there, but that's my hope for them.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. It's
moving, man.
It's horrible.
Very touching.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I can imagine, so young, how that affected you. You know, seeing that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry I delved into such a topic.
No, because you know, I asked you because I know that was one of the places that Millie Small played in when she had her monster hit in '64. She went to Australia, and a lot of the countries that were colonized by England because of the commonality of the English language. So she did play Australia, right? Yeah, sort of a introduction to Jamaican music. So I'm just assuming that the radio stations were playing it. But
Yeah.
maybe you were in the suburbs where horrible things were still happening.
Yes.
Oh
So-
yeah, I was in it was a hillbilly town. Like when Bucko 9 toured Australia, I think we went there 3 times. Never played in Northern Territory or anywhere close to Alice Springs, but people would ask, or I'd have conversations, and it would come out sometimes and they'd be like, "What the fuck were you doing living there? That's just like a fucking hillbilly town." And I'm like, I know, dude.
Don't say you didn't have any say. And it's good you lived there because you gained that experience that you wouldn't have gained living anywhere else necessarily.
Yeah.
Maybe apartheid South Africa.
Can I add something though, Jonas? And this is up to you if you want to share this part of it. But there was also a major situation with your family, and that stems from the Holocaust and situation that led you guys to Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say like for no, I appreciate you bringing that up. That's
since we're getting real on this stuff, and we're talking about.
Well, yeah, I guess interestingly enough, I'm a first generation American. I was born obviously in Virginia, but all my family's from Austria, Vienna, Austria for generations, but the Holocaust, they had to leave. And that's just an insane story in itself, which has been actually, believe it or not, documented in books. My grandmother, Greta, her name was Greta Kleiner, or Gretel. She was a singer, and she was a singer in Vienna, Austria, a musician. She played folk music back then. And so like when they escaped, they barely escaped. The guy I'm named after was actually arrested by the Nazi police. And my dad was born there it was just before Kristallnacht, which is when they call it the Night of Broken Glass, when basically the entire Nazi regime influenced the locals to destroy everything that had to do with Jewish. But anyway, fast forward, my grandmother, she used to, when all the Jews that escaped, some of them went to where my folks went, which is in Shanghai, China. So my dad grew up in a ghetto, literally a ghetto designated for Jews. And it was interesting because, my family are musicians, and they, my grandmother, who I'm speaking of, she was able to perform, and I think she gave the biggest concerts of her life in Shanghai. In the ghetto, they would book like hundreds and hundreds of people, and she was singing. She had a piano player. My father was a child, and he remembers that. But it was interesting. Maybe Pebs, and so some of my family made it to Australia instead of China. But if you ask why they went to China, it's because the United States had cut off immigration at that point, and there's no other place they could go. And back then, Shanghai was like anyone could get in without a visa. So they paid all this money for a boat trip down to Shanghai. And so I'm kind of an anomaly in that sense, where for as much shit as like this country has with China, and I'm not even going to comment on any politics, but if it wasn't for that fucked up Chinese ghetto that was controlled by the Japanese fucking Gestapo, I wouldn't be here, because my family needed a place to go, and they ended up there.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
Sorry, Jonas. I
don't think there's a need to apologize.
No. I mean, I didn't mean to throw him under the bus, but like, Jonas is one of my dearest and longest friends, and I know the story, and I've heard it before, and it's a very warming and heartfelt, situation that he lived through. I know his dad very, very well. I even got a chance to meet his grandmother. And since we were kind of on that topic, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus, JK, but
no, dude, I appreciate you bring that up. That's so kind. I mean, I don't think I've ever talked to anyone about that except my close friends. So
yeah,
there you go.
And now it's on the History of Ska.
There we
Yeah.
go.
right.
LA Ska.
We
Yes, sir.
appreciate
Definitely.
you opening up, being vulnerable
So
like that.
that's a good segue into the evolution of Bucko Nine. I think the year was 1991 when the band was first formed. Take us back to 1991, that glorious year.
Okay. Well, basically, so Jonas and I both kind of came in a little bit later. And when I say a little bit later, I'm talking like months, not, too much. The band was formed with Steve, our drummer, who's still our drummer now. He took a hiatus, but we could talk about that later. Anyways, the guys had kind of gotten this band together. Craig was playing sax, Dan was playing trombone, Steve was playing drums. There was a bass player named Scott Kennerly, who was kind of the guy that basically started the band. It was his kind of, idea. It was kind of his thing. He had written on most of the songs. They had another guitar player in there that was basically just, he was decent in his own respect and could do what Scott needed him to do. And then eventually, they had a singer that was in there, and I guess they felt that, his I don't know, stage presence or lyrics or vocals or maybe all of it. I don't know. I wasn't there. weren't working for them, and they had played a show opening up for the Boss Tones. And apparently Dickie told them that they were the worst ska band that he had ever seen in his life.
And that's
Wow.
Now, me and Jonas weren't there, so I don't know.
Here we go.
But it's kind of an honor, though, if you think about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
At least he paid attention.
Yeah.
How many
And
shitty ska bands had he seen at that point? And then
Oh,
all of a
yeah.
sudden,
very few, right?
Yeah. So we always, now that we're, we've gone on through the years, that joke keeps kind of, it's not a joke, it actually happened, but the story, is still alive, and we talk about it with Dickie from time to time, and and he's like, well, I don't know, I remember that, and I don't know if you guys, maybe he's like, I don't know if you guys have even gotten any better since then. Fucking whatever. But it's kind of a fun back and forth that we have, with him and stuff. But it was a turning point, I think, in the band, because that's when Scott and Steve and Craig, Dan, decided that it was time to find a couple of new members. Wow. And they started with getting rid of their singer, and that's where I came in. I actually answered an ad in the newspaper here in San Diego, called the San Diego Reader, which is like, similar to any newspaper that has like, classified ads and stuff in the back of the paper, because there's no internet at the time. And there was an ad that just said ska band looking for punk singer. And that particular Thursday, when that newspaper came out, because I was looking, I moved down here for that very purpose, was to find a band that I could be in. And when I saw those two words in the same sentence, I'd never put that together as something that could ever be in the same band.
Right.
But when I saw that ad, and I'll never forget it as long as I live, I mean, I ran to the phone like there was a fucking fire in the room. So I ran and I called that number, and it was Craig, our sax player, who's rehearsing right now, as I told you guys earlier, for our new record with Dan. And he was like, yeah, man. I said, yeah, look, I don't know about the ska thing. I can tell you this: I love ska music, I love reggae, and but I'm a punk singer, and that's what your ad said. So he's all, can you come down on Tuesday? And I said, I'll be there, man. You just tell me where to be. And that's how I got into the band.
Nice.
The rest is history.
Yeah. And how about you?
Kinda. And the next phase was, and then I'll let Jonas take over, was when I got into the band, the first thing I noticed after a little while was like, we need a better guitar player. We need a real, like, a guy that can really take this whole mixing punk and ska, and understand the two in a way that can, where he can take it and make it something unique. And we put out an ad in that very same newspaper, and that's where I met Jonas.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Before you go into the formation, I think we should acknowledge the members of the band. Their names, because they have family, friends, relatives.
Sure.
Yeah. Who are the members?
So there's Steve Bauer. He's the drummer. He's the original drummer. He was with us through the first 3 records, which is up through 20 Teeth era. Then he took a break, and then he came back. Now he's been back in the band for probably 8 or 9 years, I think. So he's basically our drummer. Then we have Scott Kennerly, who was the founding member. He was the bass player, and he was in the band all the way through the Libido album, the 4th album, and then he stepped down. And our friend Andy Platfoot took over from there. Well, John Bell, the guy who passed out on stage that we talked about earlier, filled in for, I don't know, what do you think, Jonas? Like 6 months, 8 months, maybe, something like that. Wasn't very long, but he went to Japan with us.
Maybe like a year or so.
Maybe a year, yeah. So then Andy Platfoot took over, and he's been in the band ever since. And he's been on the Sustain album, the Fundamental album, and the live album that we put out a little while ago. And he's been working with us on the current record, which is going to be called Cut Out the Noise.
Nice.
And then there's Craig, saxophone player, original member. He's been in the band since before Jonas and I. He's been a major part of the band, writing horn lines and being a tour manager at points, different things like that. His counterpart Dan, playing trombone, original trombone player, has been in the band forever. Now, Dan's very, very good friend in high school. They went to an art school together. His name's Tony Curry. He's our trumpet player to this day. Told us, hey, my buddy plays trumpet, and we play in a reggae band together called T.I.R.E. Dread here in San Diego. And what if I was to bring Tony down to band practice one of these days and see what it sounds like in a ska band, And so we were like, yeah, that'd be great. So one day Tony showed up, and he said, listen, I've never heard music like this before. I've never heard punk rock before. I don't even know what you guys are doing. This is crazy. And it's so fast, but I like it. And I think I could play trumpet, real fast and shit, like this, but all my horn lines are going to sound like reggae. And we thought that was cool as hell. So we were
because reggae's got soul.
Yeah. So that's how Tony came in the band. He's still in this band to this day, and he's actually now he's the producer of our records. So he's kind of a, what we like to call, like a tech nerd. Yeah. He's a computer genius basically, and he's super into sonic, sound stuff, and he mixes and masters and records and knows mic techniques and all this kind of stuff. So he produced the Fundamental album. He produced the live album that we did, and now he's in the process of producing Cut Out the Noise.
Nice.
So he's a key member. And then and then there's Jonas and I. That's it.
So Jonas, you answered the ad?
I did. I answered the ad, and it was very similar to what Pebs his reaction. I think that's one of the reasons why John and I click so well, is because we had very similar things happen to us at similar times in our life. But yeah, at that point, I had moved to San Diego. I wanted to, my first punk band in high school was called Provoked. And then I had a couple bands with some friends after that. But what I wanted to do more than anything was join a ska band at that point, and I had already been in like a bunch of different bands, but we didn't play. None of those bands played ska. So yeah, I knew how to play reggae and ska, and I saw this ad, and I was just like, yeah, that's kind of cool. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And they're basically just saying like guitarist needed for a ska band, and so I met up with the dudes. They had the audition, and I think Steve was the first one, our drummer, to say that I was in, because after the audition, he's just like, yeah, dude, you can just leave your amp here, bro. Like at the practice place. And I was like, right on, that's awesome.
I remember that very well.
Yeah.
Well, I think the next night or the next time we got together to start rehearsing the songs after they said I was in the band, I remember one of the first songs of Buck 09 I learned. And if you ever heard our demo, well, our demo tape had all those songs, but one of them was Happy Stay, and we ended up putting it on our first record as well, Songs in the Key of Brie. Yeah. But I remember the opening thing is like Dan just going, ah, ha, ha, ha. And it's just like this big E minor chord. And I remember like asking our, Scott, the bass player, I'm like, dude, is it cool if I play E minor 7th? And like everyone stopped and just started laughing, because they're just like, what the fuck, dude? Like, we don't talk that language. I'll just play it, and if you hear something weird, then I'll stop.
That's great. So let's talk about the San Diego scene at that time. So, or even prior to 91. And we had a great conversation with John Roy, who you guys know, from a fellow San Diego guy. Who I know played. Yes, who played in Spy Kids with Craig. He was with John Roy earlier today, and he mentioned that. And we know like Donkey Show, Gangbuster, but talk about that scene maybe from the mid to late 80s on to the early 90s.
That's really a tough question for Jonas and I. Well, I can only speak for myself, but like Jonas was saying, him and I both were transplants into San Diego.
Right.
And I came here in 80, like the later part of 89. Jonas came in, I think you said 92. So the San Diego music scene, especially the ska portion of it, wasn't something that I was even aware of, really. When I first got here, I was still like in full mode of like, fucking Bad Brains are playing. That's where I'm going. The Cro-Mags or whatever. Like, I was into the Chili Peppers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, of course, I always dearly had all my ska records with me at all times. And if there was a ska band, sure. But that, I think the scene that you're talking about with like Donkey Show and Gangbusters and that kind of stuff, I totally missed all that. Unfortunately, because I just wasn't, I didn't have friends that I grew up with. So I didn't know like the kind of more underground shit that was happening, like I knew the bigger shows that were advertised in the newspaper and there was big flyers about or whatever. Sure. Of course, if Fishbone came to town, then I was at that show without hesitation, or the Untouchables or something like that. But I know those bands from LA,
sure.
And so, so like Gangbusters and stuff, I wasn't even made aware of them until I met Craig. But Craig and Steve, if you want to ask that question, those are the two guys to talk to about San Diego ska scene, because they were both here, they grew up here, and they knew that shit, and they know those bands. They could probably talk about bands that I've never even heard of.
Right.
But one thing we know for sure, that there was a strong reggae scene in San Diego.
Yes, absolutely, without question.
Right.
There's still to this day. I mean, San Diego.
Yes.
I mean, San Diego is. It's San Diego. It's like, like miniature. It's a little miniature Hawaii. It's a little miniature, Caribbean in a lot of ways, right? I mean, this is in LA. That's for sure. So there's a lot more kind of like I don't know, it's more relaxed and chill, and that kind of sound just
Great way to put it.
it goes along with the weather. It goes along with the vibe of the communities here, you know. So that kind of music is just like, it's just a natural kind of feel, I think, for San Diego. You know.
Yes.
I want to take you back to 1995, Jonas. When
Okay.
you to the record label, is it how you pronounce it? The A is broad, Tang.
Tang.
Tang, yeah.
Right. Take us back to 1995. That experience.
Sure. So like Pebs was saying, I mean, we were kind of newcomers to the scene. So with Buck-O-Nine, we were playing all kinds of shows. And locally at that point, we had released Songs in the Key of Breedy, our very first record in August '94. But so we were playing a lot, like progressively more and more every year. And I joined in, I think it was like April of '92 or something like that, or maybe, I don't know, I can't remember, sometime in '92. But from then I noticed, whoa, we're starting to get more and more shows. And so Curtis, who owned Tang Records in Boston, moved out here for whatever reason. I mean, who wouldn't want to move to San Diego, right? So he opened Tang West in San Diego and Mission Beach on Garnett and Cass. Like, was right there, prime location. It was awesome. And we used to we met him he saw us play, and he you know, became a friend. And we would hang out at the shop all the time. We'd go back to his place in Mission Beach and hang out there. And you know, it was like a friendship thing. Then he approached us at one point and he's just like, well, do you guys, I want to take your song Barfly and add like a few covers, because at that point we'd already been incorporating some covers into our set, like Pass the Dutchie, Teenagers from Mars, and Wrong and Boyo. So those were and so he's like, yeah, so let's do this thing. And so he had contacted the label that originally put out Key Bree and got us into the recording studio, and we just kept recording. And he thought we only had like 5 songs or something, which I don't understand because he'd seen us live. But so we're like, no, dude, we got ton more songs that we could record. And so we ended up making Barfly, and we're so excited. And Curtis was really cool with us because back then he'd already had this huge reputation as, you know, he put out the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, he put out Gangrene, he was like integral, like Boston hardcore guy. Moved out.
Catalog, yeah.
What's that?
That's a respected catalog.
Yeah. And so he was just like, we're going to make Barfly your debut release on Tang. It's going to be release number 109. And we're like, fuck yeah, that's awesome. Like he was just a friend. And at the time, it was like there was no way a label, like we needed an indie label to work with, because like I think even at that point, John, you had sent the Buck Naked demo tape to like Fat Mike, and he's just like, nope, not interested. And like, you know,
actually what it said was, he's all, yeah, listen to your demo tape, and you know what, it's just not that good, so I'm gonna pass.
Between Fat Mike's comment and you had Dickie's comment.
Yeah. So we were pretty much operating on like,
that didn't discourage you guys though.
No.
Yeah, no, because we were like, I don't know, it feels good to us, like we like it. So
yeah, and we didn't have a lot of options for releasing music back then. So Curtis had national distribution or international even, and we were just like, yeah, let's do it. And it was weird because shortly after we released Barfly, all of a sudden Curtis did a deal with Toys Factory, which is this label in Japan, very, very big label in Japan at the time. So Toys Factory releases Barfly, and all of a sudden we're going to Japan for our first time with Curtis. And it was just like the weirdest thing, because we're just, yeah, it was incredible. I mean, because you go there and the label's like catering to your every need, and you know, they're telling us that we sold a lot of records and they're really happy. And I was just like, I didn't even know this was happening. And all of a sudden, Kurt's all, hey, dude, so like, check it out. We could go over to Japan and play, and the Voodoo Glow Skulls are going to be there. And we're like, yeah, we'd love to. And we get there, and I mean, John's really good at telling this story, but 95 was an incredible year for us because we were on tour most of the year. We did some very to our band like tours that we'll always remember. Like we did a 5 or 6 week tour with Agent Orange in 95. We did like a 6 or 8 week tour with the Suicide Machines in 95.
Was that all
went
specials then, or was that later?
What's that?
I think that was in 96, the
Okay.
specials.
Okay.
Yeah, 96. But it was definitely a catalyst to getting on those shows, the special shows.
Yeah. Talk specifically about Japan. What was that like?
Incredible.
It's almost like, yeah, undescribable, really. You know, for us, I mean, I can only speak from my own like perspective of it, but I have told this story before, and it's still as fresh in my memory as ever. But I remember being at the very first show. It was with the Voodoo Glow Skulls, and we were in this pretty big like venue, and everybody in I think it held maybe close to 800 people, and everybody that was there was sitting on the floor before we played. And I remember looking out from our like little dressing room that was kind of like on this upstairs thing. Remember that, Jonas? And we like yeah. And dude, I remember looking down there, I'm like, oh my God, everybody's sitting down. Like, what is this? Because we're used to like people jumping off stages and flopping around and dancing and doing all kinds of whatnot. And so then I started to get super nervous. And then they came and get us from the dressing room. They're like, okay, it's time to go on. So we walk up on stage. And as we kind of like walk on stage to all take our positions and where we're going to start the first song, everybody pops up out of their sit down positions and just kind of hones in towards the stage. And they all start, this liveliness pops up in their eyes, and we kick into the first song. I think I said, we're Bucko 9, which is what I always say. And then the guys click into the first song. And by the time we got to the first lyric, I go to the microphone, and as I open my mouth to start the first word of the first lyric, so did what seemed like every single person also in the room.
The choir was there waiting for you guys.
Yeah.
And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I got so choked up emotionally that, because it was such a powerful like feeling. I'd never experienced anything like that before, and I got so choked up I couldn't even sing. So luckily they knew the words, and I managed to get myself together by the time the chorus hit, and then boom, from there it was just magic. It was something that, like, I will tell my grandkids and write in my memoirs if I ever make it to that point. You know what I mean? Like, it was like the most magical, beautiful moment that our band, I think, has ever had. And probably I don't know if it could ever be matched.
Right.
And that's after that massive rejection by essentially 2 persons.
Yeah, pretty much.
I love that.
But you gotta, the thing about, back to the record label business for a second, though, the thing you got to remember, and that I always remind myself of, is back in those days, there was no possibility or thought of some major record label taking you on and putting you on the radio. You know what I mean? Like, we're lucky enough to be an old enough ska punk band to not have started with the idea that it's possible to be on the radio, because to us it was like, that's just not even part of it. It
Why would
wasn't
you rule out that possibility?
because it had never been done before. It's kind of like in punk rock. You think when the Circle Jerks started their band, you know, they never thought, oh yes, Warner Brothers Records is going to sign us, or you know, we'd like that'd be our aspiration. You know how like big rock bands, when they start, they're like, well, yeah, we want to get signed with a big label. We want to be on the radio. You know, for us, like those types of things had never happened before to a ska band.
So you had realistic expectations.
Yeah, we did. But it wasn't even something that we could have even really thought of as a dream. There was no Real Big Fish back then, you know, yet. There was no Goldfinger. There was No Doubt. I mean, there was No Doubt, but they were still an underground band, you know? I mean, Fishbone had a, you know, Party at Ground Zero that had been played on the radio and stuff, but that was kind of like, that was almost seemed like it was kind of like a novelty or something, maybe. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, so like we weren't in that mode. So like Fat Mike saying, yeah, whatever, or you know, somebody else saying it was like, you know, whatever, we don't care. I mean, we're just doing this for fun. Anyways.
Plus we're pretty simple people as individuals. We all have that in common. And I feel like because of that, we were never into it to like have hit singles and be rock stars. We're just into it because we love playing music and we love playing with each other, playing music with each other. And so like, I think if we would have got caught up in like a major label feeding frenzy type scenario, it would have just broke up the band because, I mean, you guys know the music biz is fucking shady. It's so shady. And you know, for what it's worth, I mean, shit, we put out a record on TVT, well, several records on TVT, and they were essentially a major label, but with their own distribution. So they were indie. But, and that was incredible. It was huge. But from that perspective, I see how like musicians are always poor because they're always I started looking at labels like banks. I'm like, you know something? When you're in a band and you want to do your thing, it's like you go to a label, they loan you money, which is the advance, right? And they're like, yeah, we'll sell your product, which is basically, we'll get you on MTV, we'll get you on this, and we'll do this and that. And you sign away everything. And then all of a sudden, you know, I mean, thank God we didn't get caught in any weird 360 deals or any weird management deals. And we always owned our own publishing. So, I mean, like that's another thing. John and I were like super interested in the music business just because we were fascinated by how it worked. And so we studied up on this stuff. And even though, you know, we made some dumb decisions over the years, but it could have been a lot worse. You know?
Yeah, for sure. But I like the idea. I like the fact that like we were never motivated by any type of business, you know, like everything that we did was motivated by like the art of the whole thing. You know, it was motivated by like, let's write great songs. Let's try to like, you know, do the best that we can to like make cool melodies and make cool horn lines and rhythms. And, you know, like we were more invested in those things, which I thought was really good because I know a lot of musicians, you know, that have been around for, you know, a long time, and they're more interested in kind of like, okay, well, what can we do? What kind of songs can we write, or how can we get ourselves in a situation where our music will get played on the radio? You know, and that's all well and good, you know, totally cool. But I like being in this band because of the fact that we were more motivated by just the art itself, you know, and to this day, I feel like we're still like that, you know, and the business side, that's a whole nother thing that I feel like is none of our business.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
It's a moving target, you know.
It's just no. I love that. I'm gonna steal
that was D.H. Lawrence, by the way. I didn't count that.
We all lost the latter part of last year, Terry Hall. So
yeah.
With the specials, talk about that experience.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, for me, that man was like probably the most important musical figure in my whole life, you know. When he, yeah, it was like,
it's sad. It was definitely on the level of like, and coincidentally, Jeff Beck passing away shortly thereafter. It's just like Terry Hall. It was such a incredible, just an incredible songwriter, and his approach to how he communicated with the fans, and like the last thing he would say, you know, during a live set was love, love, love. Like he was a genuinely good soul, I feel like, and he happened to be at the right place at the right time, and connected with a lot of people. So yeah,
you guys did open for him once or twice.
well, unfortunately, when we opened up for the Specials, Terry wasn't in the band at the time.
Oh, right. Yes, you're during that period. You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was, Roddy was singing all of Terry's parts.
Yep.
And playing all of his guitar parts, which was insane.
And Horace too, I think, was singing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Horace.
I was watching the
Horace Panther.
yeah. I was watching the Grammys the other night, and they did you know how they do the, like, you know, these people passed away this year.
Yep.
And it's always like, okay, you know, bummer, that sucks, you know. And there's a lot of people I felt pretty strong about, like, wow, that's such a drag, you know. That person died, and then boom, all of a sudden they gave Terry Hall was on the big screen.
Yeah.
And it said,
I saw that.
and I jumped out of my seat like I was watching the fucking Super Bowl, and my team just scored a touchdown. I'm like, one of our people finally is in, like, the Grammys, you know. And unfortunately, it's because he died, but nevertheless, I was so fucking stoked. My wife was like, dude, what the fuck is happening? Like, what just happened? And I'm like, they just said Terry Hall. And they just gave him that moment of respect that was just enough for me to feel like, dude, that is so badass.
Yeah, this special,
you know?
very respected in many circles, especially progressives on the left, you know, especially after they did that song tribute to Nelson Mandela.
Right.
Yeah. They garnered fans worldwide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Big love and respect to Terry.
Yeah. That was a big moment. And you know, and who knows, someday there could be some fucking cool young reggae band or a ska band, like a little traditional style band, or like a rocksteady band or whatever, that just may just set the fucking whole thing on fire and win Grammy of the year, you know, or whatever. Like, even like the Interrupters right now, it's like, you know, those are our people inspired by the same music that we are, you know. They're playing and they're good. Right. They're really good. And I mean, I couldn't be happier to have that band out there playing music. Like, good fucking solid, you know. Like, I thought maybe the Agrolites would be that band.
Yeah.
You know, I really did. I thought the Agrolites, that's a band that could go up against Grammy nomination.
Yeah. I mean,
level.
And the true grit and soul.
They still could. They're, it's not like they're breaking up or anything.
Right.
I mean, Jesse's he's a young man.
Yeah.
You know, he's got a lot of life ahead of him. So
absolutely true. So let's talk about some of the other bands that you all toured with throughout the, let's say, the 90s. To touch on a few of the others that we haven't mentioned yet.
Okay. I don't know. What do you think, Jonas? Like, I mean, there's so many of them. MU330, I would say.
Yeah. MU330, Gangster Fun. That was like our first tour.
Yeah. The Skamalu. It was called the Skamageddon Tour.
Yeah. No one stood out.
But since nobody came to any of the shows, like literally, we eventually, by the time we were about halfway through, we started calling it the Skama-Loser Tour. Right?
Exactly. Where some of the cities you guys perform? What? Some of the cities. No one came out. What cities?
Oh, cities. There's a lot of
Oh man,
Midwest in there, but it was
yeah,
pretty much.
Flap city after city.
yeah, oh yeah.
I think like there was back in those days, like that was 94. So 94, 95 for us specifically were touring years where say you'd be on tour for 2 months, right? So you're gonna play at least 55 shows. So of those 55 shows, I always expected that about 10% of them would just be fucking awesome. And then the majority of them would just be kind of like, who are these dudes? And then a small percentage of them would be like the bartender. So that was kind of like what happened with us in MU and Gangster Fun, except, like when we played in St. Louis, which is where MU 330 is from, they always had a huge crowd, Yeah. And then and the same with Gangster Fun, like those bands were known in certain areas. So that it helped us get to those areas as well. Agent Orange was probably one of my favorite tours of all time back in that era, because I was, like a huge fan of Mike Palm and Agent Orange. He's probably my first guitar hero, Mike Palm. And so going to see them we're playing and then see them every night. I watched their entire show, and because that was like Living in Darkness was probably one of my top, by all time top 5 records. So like, there's no way I'm missing out on that. And it was just like, the Suicide Machines, another band that we toured with, which was incredible because they're such an amazing band live. And, again, sometimes we play in front of no one. Sometimes we play in front of like a packed house. And it started getting progressively better, especially when the Specials asked us to do a tour with them. And we branched out more. We did a tour with Mephistopheles, like up and down, I think a lot of the East Coast and like Midwest. And then we did craziest tour was probably with Primus. And it just kind of we would just get we went and toured with the Blue Beanies. I think the way it worked for us was we progressively toured with like pretty much every ska band, Mustard Plug. Like we played all these shows with all these bands and we met all these amazing people in our world. Like John was saying, these are our people. So like we play shows with Heppat or like random shows with Dancehall Crashers. All pretty much, even we're like Real Big Fish or the Aquabats, like we're always playing shows with all these bands that are our people. And then all of a sudden we go on tour with Primus. And just get
with Primus is different than playing a show with Mobtown and Meal Ticket down there.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very, very different. There's a lot of fuck you, get off the stage.
You're kidding. That bold.
I
want to take you to it seems as if I'm moving chronologically, but 1997. I sort of like the title of 28 Teeth. Is that how many teeth you have? But tell us about that album.
And that was now on TBT Records.
Right? What's behind the title?
So 20 Teeth, well, the title actually just comes from being on tour for so long and so many nights and days, driving in that van, and you get so bored and start saying weird shit and talking about weird things and making up weird sounds and jokes. And I think the title basically comes from, like, at one point I fucking got so bored I counted the teeth in my mouth. And so that summarizes touring for me, is I have 28 teeth, and who would ever count their teeth? But someone who's like maybe in jail, or someone who's on tour,
or someone who's going to dental school.
Is there a standard
number? Yeah, or a dental dentist or something. And it's so weird. I don't know. It's just one of those things, and it just kind of stuck. I don't know. Everybody seemed to like the idea, so we went with it. And then ended up there was a song on the album too called 28 Teeth, and it was about being on the road, and just being in different cities. And I think there's a line in there about getting sick by eating Mexican food in like Iowa or something. I don't remember now, but you know what I mean? And we're from San Diego, so eating Mexican food somewhere else, is probably not going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The album did yield, if nothing else, one major hit, right? My Town. That went
Yep.
big.
Mm-hmm. I think I think they consider it to be a mild hit, but it was like it did do pretty well. Like, and these are all terms.
Call it a monster hit.
Okay, that's cool.
Carry on.
But it did get. I think at one point it was getting somewhere close to in between 800 and 900 spins a week on commercial radio stations across the country, which is it's pretty good. And it got added to major rotation on K-Rock 3 weeks before its original ad date, which is also a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And it's it started also in San Diego at 91X, and so I mean it was that song was a huge thing for us and enabled us to do a lot of stuff that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Right.
So.
And in 97, that was also around the time where there was some other type of ska influence type songs on commercial radio too, right? What are some of the other?
Yeah. I think like Real Big Fish had their Sellout song. I think Goldfinger had their song. Clearly No Doubt, had also there were probably a couple of songs deep at that point. Sublime had a couple songs go in at that time. Less Than Jake had one. I think I can't remember like anybody like. I'm sure there was a couple others, but I don't
Save Ferris.
Oh, well, the Boss Tones.
The Boss Tones, yeah. Rancid.
Rancid,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the in some ways kind of the golden era, right? Of some of the ska pop or ska.
Yeah. So that era is 97, 95
mid
90s.
Mid 90s, maybe to early.
Yeah.
And then what happened after that?
Everybody, Limp Bizkit.
Totally.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what happened. I mean,
although I did meet Wes Borland and we on the Warped Tour and we like restrung our guitars in tandem. So I could say I've crossed strings with Wes Borland.
That's one way. Yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I remember actually him being a cool guy. I don't know about the lead guy, but no, but I think like one of the main things that happened, and these are all theories, of course, because none of us really, really know. But I think that the way that the media kind of framed ska, wasn't very positive. I think it was like they kind of framed it as this kind of frat boy rock, thing that was happening for a second, and it's all fun and games, and they don't, there's no real substance to it, and it's just kind of like a fly by night thing. And obviously like I don't know, Gregory Isaacs is sitting there thinking, the fuck are you talking about? Or like these guys like Joseph Hill are like, what do you mean? We've been doing this shit since the 60s, and so I think it just got kind of written off like there was it's almost as if there was nothing before the third wave. They didn't understand that this was the third wave of this music that's been going on since like the early 60s.
Sure.
And has a history and such a rich history that it just got blown past, and that was one of the things. That's even why I said that to Carson Daly that night on the radio, was like, oh man, this goes way beyond what you think it is. There's roots here that go back 25 years from this point. And I think that may have been probably the downside of it, was that
people not knowing,
just not realizing it. And then you start to look at it like, well, there's a reason why they call it the two-tone era and then the third wave, because there's breaks in between the traditional you know, era from where it started.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in England, there's a bit of a spark and it comes back. And then that spark fades out, you know, and the only bands that are keeping that thing alive is Fishbone, the Toasters, the Untouchables, and like, you know,
American Spark.
Yeah. Then somewhere in there, the Boss Tones, you know, come along and kind of give it a new boost.
Yeah.
And then No Doubt kind of like, you know, helped out too quite a bit.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But in between those times, in between, you know, the traditional era, the two-tone era, there's these little gaps, you know, and this is just then it became the next gap. And now in between third wave and now, you know, there's been a lot of cool bands like, you know, the Agrolites, the Interrupters and stuff like that. And then, you know, then all the two-tone bands are coming back. All third wave bands are still around, and a lot of the we just played with the Scotalites like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So
we have Stranger Cole coming to the El Rey Theater.
There you go.
Yeah.
And
so
out here last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe there's no fourth wave. Maybe it's just all the waves just kind of.
I think there's a marriage. There's a marriage, the legend. Yeah. And it continues.
Yeah. And it's never going to die because there's people that love it too much, you know.
Especially in Latin America, now, places like Mexico, Colombia.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
they love it.
Yeah.
Have
you guys?
Yeah, it's amazing. Like just to be part of that. I mean, I think really what it all comes down to is like ska music was never meant to be like pop music, but the whole thing is like with any genre of music, sometimes it goes in and out of fashion. And I guess it's kind of ironic that, you know, it's not like ska isn't meant to be like hit music, because like really where that whole sound came from was like R&B. That's how the pianists in Jamaica interpreted rhythm and blues coming from the United States with just that heavy that. So it's just like, you know, it'll always be a sound. It's a sound that's integral to music. I mean, it's got roots all over the world. And so it'll always be here. Like Jon said, just sometimes it bubbles up and people take notice of it. And I think during that period of time, radio was very interested in it because, you know, why does radio exist? It just to sell ads. So like a lot of people were all of a sudden tuning into like those stations, and they're like, whoa, this song. And they don't care what genre it is. They're just playing whatever drives, you know, and that continues now in some respect to digital radio. But nevertheless, I think if you're into playing music and you grasp something that just blows your mind, and you've like as a player, you know, when I first heard ska music and reggae music and punk rock, like it gripped me to the point where I had to learn to play it. And I think ska will always be around because of that. There's always going to be players like kids who are just 3 years old now who are going to discover ska and become like the next, you know, rad ska musician. And
it's danceable. You know, the energy behind it.
It's
undeniable. Who, you know, to quote one of the greatest, I'm a rebel, soul rebel. You know, I mean, that summarizes it right there. It's, you know, it's a rebellious, soulful music, and that isn't something that everybody can understand or digest.
Right.
You know, it might just be too much, like, you know, for your average person, you know, that needs it to be a little bit more sugar filled and bubblegummy.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. No, very, very well said. So in more recent years, if I'm not mistaken, you guys released an album on Asian Man. So you work with Mike Park. Talk about. I'm sure you guys have known Mike and worked with whether it was Skank and Pickle or.
Oh yeah, Skank and Pickle's another band that we played lots of shows with early in the. And I gotta say, like, shout out to Mike Park because he helped us with so much stuff.
Yeah.
Such a cool guy, genuine, warm, beautiful person.
Yeah.
100%. Like, Mike, I mean, we learned, I mean, I think it would be pretty safe to say that almost everything that we learned as a band, as far as how to do it, and how to make phone calls and figure out where to get shows and those types of DIY things that, we were experiencing in those early days, we learned so much of it from Skank and Pickle and Mike Park.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah,
Nice, nice.
yeah. I could imagine. I mean, talk about someone. Mike has just been his entire life dedicated to not only being in the band, but helping put out.
Consistency.
Yes,
he's known for his consistency.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a guitarist, I mean, Lynette was like an influence on me, like seeing Skank and Pickle and watching her play and being like, whoa, she's such a good player. And so yeah, another influence all along. I remember Mr. Clean with like his rad bass stuff.
Yeah, totally.
So some career highlights over the years. You've played numerous places, countries, festivals. Any highlights you want to share with us?
I mean, my first one that always comes to mind is the story I already told about Japan. So that'll be marked down in my book for forever. I think that also, like, I think one show that we played where we were kind of on our, trajectory up, and as far as like, selling tickets, selling records, and, records and things like that were popping for us for that at that time was we played a show at the Metro in Chicago, and we were the headlining band. It was a sold out show. And I remember walking on stage and just looking out at the crowd, and it's a sold out Metro show. And we had played there before as an opener.
Yes,
but I remember thinking like, holy fucking shit. We live in we're from San Diego. We're like a little San Diego ska band. We're in Chicago. We're headlining a show, and it's a sold out. And like, I remember that thought and that feeling of just thinking, wow, I think it's safe to say we've made it. Like, I think it's safe to say we've really done something. Right?
After massive rejection numerous times.
yeah.
Standing tall in Chicago to win the city.
Yeah.
By the wind.
Right.
I don't know about you, Jonas, but those are my two favorite moments that I could think of.
What other moments, Jonas?
Nice.
Yeah, I've had I mean, just the most incredible moments as a musician, like with this band, obviously, like just being able to, the people that we've met, the shows. I mean, I think to me, like that era that we're talking about, when we really, like, all of a sudden people, like lots of people were interested in us. So it was kind of a blur because, and that's a cliche, everyone says that, I guess, but we were playing consistently, like packed show. Like sometimes it'd be a festival. And but I have to say, one of my favorite moments, just from a guitar perspective, because obviously I'm a guitar player, we opened up for the Brian Setzer Orchestra here in San Diego at the outdoor, what's the amphitheater at San Diego State?
Open air theater.
So yeah, so like we're playing and we're doing our thing. And one of the songs that was in our set at the time, there happened to be a section where I have this kind of like lengthy guitar solo thing happening over like a reggae groove. So I would just use that as like my moment to just fucking go for it. And I remember after we're done playing, I mean, over the years, I've always teched my own stuff, with the exception of maybe a year or whatever when we could afford to have people help. So I was teching my own stuff that night. And I remember pushing my amp off stage and grabbing my guitars and, just kind of like decompressing. And I have my guitars, I walk back from the stage and I hear this guy go, "Hey dude, that was awesome. You guys rule and your playing is so good." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man." And then I was like, I stopped and like, "That is Brian fucking Setzer." I'm like, "What?" Because he was another one of my first, I was like, whoa, whatever Brian Setzer is doing, I just loved. And so of course I had to go talk to him. So meeting him and talking to him, that was just like, I just kept thinking like, whoa, this guy saw me play and he just told me that. He's just like, dude, you got to go back on stage. You guys got to play more. You got to play more. And I was just like, oh, I couldn't even speak. I was just like, thanks, man. And it was so amazing. He was just like, at that point, I think he was sober. He was just drinking like a green tea before he went on stage. I see this whole rack of like Gretsch White Falcons being manicured by his guitar tech. And here he is like, yeah, that was so amazing. Like what you played on that solo. And I was just like, this is unreal. I can't even, you know.
That's great. Yeah.
That was a highlight.
His moment of glory.
Another one, Roddy Radiation, right?
Yeah.
We're playing a show, and it was when we were on tour with the Specials, and so that was all near and dear to my heart. But one show in particular, he came up and he was just thanking. Somehow I was talking to him, and he was drinking it was like a instant energy shot that he probably got at a gas station, and we're about to go on, and he's just like, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming and on tour with us. And, you know, we really appreciate, and he just said the most kind things about our band and getting to know those guys individually, even though, yeah, I mean, it wasn't the full band. Terry Hall wasn't in there, but still like those dudes were so kind to us. Like I'll always remember that.
Yeah, they were great.
So last year you all did the In Defense of Ska tour. Shout out to Aaron Carnes. But that tour was with Mustard Plug and Omnigon.
Yeah.
John, was that the first big tour since you recovered?
Yes. And yeah, as a matter of fact, I was sorry, I'm moving my location because I was in our bedroom and my wife wants to go to bed. So just bear with me for a second here, guys. Sorry. That's okay, honey. I'm just gonna turn on these lights. You can go in the bedroom now. Okay. And then I'll answer that question.
Sounds good. I love it.
Sorry.
Nice.
Say hello to Nunu and our dog Fiona.
Hi.
She's a pug chihuahua if you can actually.
Crazy.
Well, let me grab Ozzy since we're here.
Yeah,
My dog's sleeping with my I'm sure inside with my wife somewhere too.
yeah.
Yeah, my wife's gone to bed, but this is our dog Ozzy. Ozzy, who's that, dude? What are they talking about? Like ska music? Yeah.
Ozzy and Fiona are like almost like twins.
I love it.
And what's funny too, guys, is like Jonas and I, we live about 5 miles away from each other, but we still just decided to do this individually.
Yeah, because after this, I want to go upstairs and crawl in the bed and just.
Yeah, I know.
We're right with you.
I think we're talking about
In Defense of Ska tour.
right. We got
So In Defense of Ska, I mean, yeah, it was originally supposed to be I think in March, right after my heart attack. So like, yeah, we had to postpone the entire tour. It was, I mean, even though it was only 10 or 11 shows, but I mean, to move that mountain was insane. And you know, kudos to our agent Dave Romano, who he also books Mustard Plug, and so he managed to move the entire tour all the way to September. You know, same venues, same promoters, same everything, and it was amazing. And then the tour itself was just incredible. I mean, the welcome from people, it was awesome. I mean, I don't know how to say it. Like we all just were so stoked at how well that run of shows really went. And you know, Mustard Plug, dude, those guys are just such real deal, genuinely fucking nice dudes, great players, you know, just so much fun to be on the road with. It was just happy to see him every day. Omnigon, you know, Aaron out there reading his book every night, you know, like What a
Yeah.
cool dude. Like he's just so down to earth and just humble and great stories, and stuff. So we got a chance to like become friends with him, and it was just man, it was so rad. It was so rad that like when we got home, I think I got depressed for about 2 weeks.
Oh wow. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like because it's kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, that was so awesome. Like, and then next thing I know, I'm back at work, and it's kind of like, oh, dude, this.
The bills have to be paid.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
I'd love to continue doing that.
yes,
every day.
We've been historicizing. How about some of the contemporary bands that you guys like? Is there any
Contemporary bands that we like? I mean, well, I don't know, Jonas. What do you say? I mean, Suicide Machines for me is the best. They're, in my opinion, the Suicide Machines are the best third wave ska band that there is,
Nice.
hands down.
I love those guys. I when you say contemporary, are you referring to like what period of time? Like now?
Yeah, but since we've been talking about bands from 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Nowadays.
Oh yeah, totally. So like well, there's we're talking about the different waves of ska. So I guess this current wave of ska, the scene, it's referred to as new tone and U-tone. So that's like a play on two-tone. And so a lot of those bands are so good. Half Past Two is awesome.
Yes.
Tap Bite is awesome. Bite Me Bambi,
Kids.
awesome. Skints, like holy shit. Interrupters, like wow.
Yeah.
I'm just happy because I get to see these bands and see the music continue. And so like again, like with ska music, there's always going to be a huge underground thing happening. And there's so many bands out there now that, I mean, We Are the Union, another band that's just like finding success. Jer went on tour with Fishbone. So like he's this kid that's just like this phenomenal player and writer, and it just continues. Like Jay from Suicide Machines, he's continuing on, and he's with a lot of these bands. He's doing the tour, the Bad Time Records tour with Jay Navarro and the Traders, and like so yeah, I'm just so happy that the scene continues. And when we played on that In Defense of Ska tour, it was amazing because, like for example, we played the Garden Amphitheater one show, and it was I mean, Tara from Half Past Two like is such an incredible marketing promoter.
We were talking about Tara earlier.
Yeah, and it was just like wow, like just all the bands working together and plugging stuff constantly. It was inspiring to me because it was like there's fresh enthusiasm for marketing, like the tour or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like
it's nice sense of community too, and the band supporting each other too.
And that's
yeah,
important to help.
Very important.
That's what I love, that part of it, and that comes from that DIY spirit, that we talked about throughout this whole conversation, and one other band that I do want to mention, and I first became aware of them on the In Defense of Ska tour when we were in Portland, was
the Bandaloos.
Bandaloos,
Yes.
dude.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fuck. Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, I was dancing. I started getting teared up at a couple points in it. I was just touched. And I mean, I've been listening to their I listen to their record all the time.
Yes.
And wow, dude, that's
I've not had a chance to see them. I have heard their music, and they've backed Norma Frazier, who Jamaican legend who lives up in Portland.
okay.
Nice.
Great. Group.
Point of interest. I was telling Eric this past weekend we went to see Roger.
Oh yeah, Roger Reed.
Yeah. And
Dave Hill.
Dave and his seven.
Rocksteady
Jackie
7.
Mendes. And I noticed the musicianship, that these musicians now are playing at a much higher level.
And it was them?
Musicians, after 10, 20 years of working together.
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good. I mean,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Solid
Well, there's a song on the Bandalas record where Chris Murray sings with them, and it's like super cool, you know. And so Chris Murray's another person that's really been there and helped, you know, kind of,
Devoted and dedicated, doesn't
yeah,
waver, doesn't compromise.
yeah. He's definitely been one of the major bits of glue that have kept ska, reggae, you know, and
Very much.
punk.
No vacillation
Like,
in this part, just
yeah,
keeping it
he's
straight.
just great. And what a voice too, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Shout out to Chris.
Yeah.
So as we come to a close here, you mentioned Cut Out the Noise is the new album you're working on. What can fans expect from that album?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, what's cool, I think, is that we're in a position where we don't have to really worry about what other people are going to think, whether it be fans or the
Wasn't that the
media.
case? That was the case from the onset, from the beginning, right?
Absolutely. So there's still that sense, you know, and so it frees us up to like kind of like do whatever feels good and feels right. So there's a little change of tone on this record, like when it comes to the lyrics, you know, since there was like it started being written during the pandemic and then continued to be finished up after, you know, heart attack and me moving back to San Diego. So lyrically, I can't really speak to where Jonas was or is at with it, but I feel Jonas's songwriting has gotten to a point where, you know, he is doing stuff that I don't think I've ever heard anyone else ever do, and still, but
You're
still
so kind.
sounding. Well, you know, I'm being honest. I mean, but
Sometimes the
still
truth must be told.
still capturing Bucko 9 essence, you know. But like, you know, he's a blues guitar player that plays in blues bands around, you know, San Diego. He's been playing blues and classical music and ukulele, you know, since we've known him. But like his own unique style, I think, is coming even. It's always been there. I think more unique than a lot of guitar players, you know. But I think on this album, it's gonna really be like, wow, holy shit, you know. There's some guitar work here that's really special.
That's
You
exciting.
know?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, buddy.
Jon Pebsworth just
Again,
melting my
sometimes the
heart.
truth must be told. To people
Yeah.
Melting
who
my
are
heart.
still alive in the flesh.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the approximate timeline?
Well, we've already finished recording all the guitars, bass, and drums. So now we're going to be recording horns next weekend, and then vocals after that, and then some backing vocals, and then, I mean, I'm hoping that we'll have it all wrapped up, recorded, and starting to mix, you know, within the next like couple of months, I think.
So you guys don't go to the studio and sing and play. You do each part individually.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We've never played these songs in the same room together ever.
Wow. Okay.
So it's all, the process is pretty, you know, it's weird because that's not how we did it back in the day, but
Right.
that's how we did Fundamental album. We never played those songs together live in the same room. So, you know, it starts off with a guitar rhythm or a riff to a click track. And then it kind of goes from there. It goes to our producer, Tony, who's the trumpet player also. And he kind of starts to help develop like a little drum rhythm. And then, you know, and then we get the bass in there, and then lyrics kind of come along, and then we kind of move things around and expand. And then we actually hit the actual studio and get Steve in there and play the real drums, and then build again on that from the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys must feel a sense of sympathy for the way it was done old school.
Yeah.
The lights.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah.
Windows have three microphones.
Yeah.
When there's 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I would love to do it that way, but you know, the reality
We
of our
did.
lives.
We put our live in the studio record out.
Right. Yeah.
But so that was like live in the studio. That was like in the depths of COVID, and we did it that way. And so luckily the songs we recorded, we had played a million times. So it was like our live set. But yeah, we'd love to record that way. We really
I'm
would.
not
It's
necessarily saying that's the right way. I'm just saying, no, with modern technology,
Yeah.
you know, parts today, guitar tomorrow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The best that we can say about that is at least all of the performances are, in fact, you know, the musicians themselves playing those parts, and you know, with very little, if any, auto tuning of any kind. It's just, you know, they're just like little bits and pieces that come from different parts of the band. And like our bass player lives in Yosemite, our drummer lives in Colorado Springs, you know, our trumpet player slash producer lives in
Colorado?
Las Vegas.
Oh, okay.
And
Right.
the rest of us live in different
Ah.
parts of San Diego. So
people
So-
move as a result of COVID, or they have always
no, not necessarily. I mean, everybody kind of has their own little story, but Tony's been in Las Vegas since before COVID. And then Andy's been up in Yosemite for at this point probably about 10 years. You know, Steve, our drummer, he's been living in Colorado Springs for probably 20 years.
Mhm.
You know. So yeah, and then I lived in LA, and now I'm back here. You know, so,
Life happens.
so yeah, life.
So just out of curiosity, how you guys rehearse when you're getting ready to go on the road?
Where do we rehearse?
How?
Well, we
get
book a
there
little
a day-
room.
Yeah, a day before the show and just kind of go through the
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
But we're all active enough musicians to where
That's beyond my imagination, but all right. So you guys get together.
yeah. I mean, we're all good enough musicians in terms of like we keep active enough to where we can we can play, you know, like Jon was saying, I play all the time. So when I'm ready, when Bucko 9 shows are coming up, I'm like itching to play and ready. And I think we're all that way. I mean, it's just like a brotherhood. So whenever we get a chance to rehearse, we'd love to. It's just we're not able to rehearse like 2 nights a week every week like we did for the beginning of the band.
Yeah.
So-
And there's a chemistry that still lives and breathes, you know, within the 7 of us. And it's really important, you know, for the members of the band to still be the members of the band, which is why we've kept basically the same lineup for 30 years.
amazing.
And that chemistry, we rely on it, you know, because it's kind of like always there. It's almost like riding a bike, you know. Whereas if we
and it's needed.
yeah
Very
much so.
necessary. I want to congratulate you guys for that. If nothing else, but
thank you.
the ability to stay together for so many
Thank
years.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Man.
thank you and congratulations and for all that you've done for the scene and for the music. And I can tell your closeness and your friendship here, guys. So
Does that mean we're done?
We're bringing it to a close. Jon
In the
Jonas.
final gallop. So any closing
Yes.
thoughts, gentlemen?
We got a show coming up, a free
Yeah.
show in San Diego. It's going to be I believe, what is it, March 19th? It's Sunday, March 19th, Rolando Street Fair, which is down in the Rolando neighborhood of San Diego. It's going to be a all-day event. It's going to be awesome. There's going to be a lot of bands there, and we're headlining, and we're going to play for an hour and 15 minutes. And again, it's free, all ages. So come out and see us if you're anywhere in Southern California or even anywhere. Even if you want to fly into San Diego, you could come see us for free.
And what can the fans expect when they show up on the 19th of March?
Probably a mix of all of our records. You know, like little little bits and pieces of everything from the early
Cool.
stuff to the new, through fundamental. You know, I don't think we'll play any of the new songs yet because they're not quite ready to play live. But yeah, I mean, and you know, of course, when you come to see Bucko 9, the usual, like, let's get rowdy and have a good time, let's dance, and you know, no fighting, and let's just smiles and fucking rock out, you know, like.
So from
have a
the
couple-
glory days to just before the modern stuff, new, modern
Yeah.
in the sense that they
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
good, nice.
Yeah, pretty much.
Bring it down memory lane to the present.
We will help
Yeah.
spread the word, but
Cool.
yeah, John and Jonas, great to see you both. Thanks for taking the time, and
Thank you.
and Jonas, actually both
Thank
of
you.
for opening up, you know, on a personal level too. So we appreciate that, and thank you both. And Junior,
Yeah, it's
thank
been
you as
amazing.
always.
Yeah, thanks to everyone, but ongoing support. Please subscribe to this podcast series and our YouTube channel, and follow us at History of LA Ska on Instagram, and join us on Facebook. And please follow Eric Kohler. I want to also mention the series that you produced for Rockery Radio, and you know, it's interesting and noteworthy and well worth checking out. This Rockery Radio at Rockery_radio.
And follow this gentleman at Junor Francis. Gentlemen, thanks so much. Big respect and love to Bucko 9.
Thank you. We appreciate
thank you,
you
guys.
so much. Thanks for
Yeah,
Good
thank
luck,
you,
good
guys.
luck with that show on March the 19th.
Yes, and all the best finishing the album as well. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank
Thanks,
you
guys.
everyone who listens and supports this program, and also the scene itself. So get out and let's keep it vibrant. So until next time, take care, everyone. Thank you, Junior.
Yes, indeed.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers,
night.
y'all.